So now we're going to give this old workbench a clean up and a paint down the bottom. So we're just going to have a white surface on that shelf down there and redo the black legs and front, etc. But we're going to sand up this top and finish that with a nice beeswax and linseed oil polish, and we're going to fill all these little holes. What I'm thinking is just melted straight beeswax in there. I'll plug up the bottom and pour beeswax in it and flatten it off, and then put the polish over the top. So we'll fill all of these gaps with the beeswax to try and give it a nice stable finish. But that's gonna come up a treat. It's a good old solid workbench. It's a bit rough, but once I've finished with it, it's going to come up beautifully, and it'll go in well with the theme of the meat hall, and be a very useful and pretty bench. Alright, so a tip with a belt sander and a very rough surface, the best way to get it back or down or flat would be to go cross grain. That's something you're going to have to fix afterwards, but if you go cross grain, but I'm more or less going a diagonal on the grain, but that way you can level off these differences between timbers, and it'll cut through it quickly. So I'll cross grain it all the way like this, and then I'll cross grain it like that one, and then when it gets nice and flat, then I'll go straight with the grain, and that way, and then get all the cross grain cuts from the sandpaper off. And once I've finished that with the 40 grit, I'll change that over to a 60 grit sandpaper, and then go over it again, and it'll come up beautiful. So this is what we call a rough sand down. So you can see I've gone over most of it. Now there's still a bit here that needs to be done, and that's actually quite a fair bit of work to get that out, because there's a bit of a dip here, so you have to sand back that way and blend it all in. And there's another area down this edge that's got a 2 or 3 mil dip there, so that means I have to sand right back around here and blend that all down in there. So there's a heap of sanding to go there, but so amazing what a coat of paint does. We've just given the shelf there the coat of the white, or it's some sort of a cream, but black faces, and look how much that has changed just with that small coat of paint. Still have to sand the top properly, and do that tomorrow. So we're getting to the end of sanding this big bench, and as you would have noticed in the previous clip, I'm sanding diagonal along that, and then standing diagonal like that, and that's just to take off big amounts of the unlevel areas. So what I've got to do now is sand up the grain. I'm still using the 40 grit sandpaper, so sand long ways on the grain, and that's basically I've got to get all of these little sanding marks out by sanding long ways, and as soon as all that's done and it's nice and clean with the 40 grit, then I'll put on a 60 grit. So we'll go down from a 40 grit to a 60 grit sander on the belt sander, and finish it off with that, and then might go over it with a piece of sandpaper in my hand just to polish up the edges and whatever. But that's how to fix up the old benches.